One of my favourite things about motorsport is when teams pick apart rulebooks to the fullest extent to create some truly insane creations. And for one of my favourite examples of this, let me take you to the 1989 IMSA Camel GT Championship and allow me to introduce you to one of the maddest machines to ever grace a racetrack, the Audi 90 Quattro IMSA GTO. To track the history of this monster, we need to go all the way back to the early 1980s. You see, with the introduction of the Quattro all-wheel drive system, Audi had entered the rallying scene and took it by storm. The Audi Quattro was the first car to use an all-wheel drive system in rallying, and it combined that with the use of a turbocharged engine, something that also had never been done before, and you start to get the idea of just how groundbreaking this car actually was. Unsurprisingly, the Quattro was massively successful in rallying. It took the manufacturer's title in 1982, the driver's title in 1983, and grabbed the double in 1984. Unfortunately, the mighty Quattro lost its home as the Group B category, folded in 1987 after the death of Lancia's Henry Toivonen at the Corsica Rally 1 year earlier. With rallying out of the picture, Audi now needed a new podium for its motorsport efforts. After a blistering last hurrah for the S1 at Pikes Peak, the decision was made to focus on a new frontier, American motorsports. The first target for Audi was the Trans Am series, which they ended with the 200 Trans Am. Some see this as the prototype for what would become the 90 GTO. And no wonder. With the Quattro drivetrain and engine, the 200 was hugely successful, taking the 1988 Drivers' Championship. Unfortunately, this didn't fall too well with the Americans, who immediately banned the use of four-wheel drive and non-American engines at the end of the season, leaving the 200 out of contention. But Audi didn't much care for these new rules, as they had already set their sights on a new target, the IMSA GT Championship. They knew the IMSA rulebook was far less restrictive than Trans Am's, which will allow them to go all sorts of mad with their new design. And that's exactly what they did. Designers drew up a steel tube frame chassis, fitted it with the infamous Quattro drivetrain, and then coupled it together with a monster of an engine. The choice fell on the exact same 2.2 litre turbocharged 5-cylinder from the S1 Pikes Peak, which was then bumped up for a barely believable 720 horsepower. On paper, this all sounded very promising, but engineers quickly ran into an all too familiar problem. Because of the way the engine had been mounted, most of the weight was placed in front of the front wheels. The result was terrible understeer. Audi's engineers looked at the rulebook for a solution, and they found one. The only restriction placed on the car's width was the total width, like the whole thing. There was nothing regarding the size of the tyres. This allowed Audi to fit some of the widest tyres ever seen on a race car. The 90 was fitted with 355mm tyres on all four wheels. To put this into context, the average tyre on a modern road car is about 205mm. This is a modern road car's tyre. This was the GTO's tyre. Quite mental. All of this was then finished off with a fiberglass body that was somewhat based on Audi's new 90 road car. The total weight of this thing came in at just over 1200 kilograms. To put that into context, that's about the same as a brand new Golf Estate these days. But that did not have 720 horsepower. This does. Audi's new creation sure was going to be fast, but it wasn't going to be an easy fight in the championship. The Mercury Cougars from Roush and the Cunningham Nissan 300 ZXs proved to be quite tough opponents. To fight back, Audi brought in quite the ensemble of drivers. Group B star Walter Röhrl, F1 driver Hans-Joachim Stuck, IndyCar star Scott Goodyear, and two-time Le Mans winner Hurley Haywood were put behind the wheel of these mighty machines. As you would expect, the 90 was very fast, but it had some teething troubles early in the season, with quite a few retirements in the early stages of the season due to technical failures. But once those problems were over, the car proved to be incredibly fast, winning races at Summit Point, Heartland Park, Sears Point, Watkins Glen, Lime Rock, and Laguna Seca. This resulted in a driver's title for Stuck, but not the Constructors' Championship, because Audi had not entered the Sebring and Daytona races in the early stages of the season. That cost them valuable points, and in the end, the championship. Unfortunately, this also meant the end for the 90 GTO. Much like what happened in Trans Am, IMSA banned the use of four-wheel drive for the next season. Once again, the Quattro system had proven to be too dominant for American motorsports. After this, Audi went back to Europe and entered the DTM series with a new car, thus closing the book on the phenomenal 90 Quattro. The Audi 90 Quattro IMSA GTO was a perfect example of what happens when a team of engineers is allowed to go all out with the design, and even though it only ever competed for one season, the dominance and sheer brute force of the car has won it a place in a racing legend forever.